In 1986, The Legend of Zelda showed us all what an adventure game was. Years down the road, A Link to the Past breathed life into the series. And finally, Ocarina of Time brought everything we loved about Zelda into 3D. It was hard to imagine what more the devs could do to innovate. So this begs the question, what's the next chapter for Zelda? Well, let's turn the page and see. Space World 2000 was where the masses first laid eyes on this epic demo. Same year that Project Dolphin was officially renamed the GameCube. Everyone was hyped and things were looking very bright for Nintendo. At the time, the two design managers, Satoru Takizawa and Yoshiki Hana, were trying to figure out which graphical direction to take for the next Zelda game. Simply sticking with the Ocarina of Time look with improved graphics was the straightforward option. But we know Nintendo. They strive to be different, especially with Miyamoto. Well, as you saw, the team actually did create a realistic prototype to see if it could work out. But according to Eiji Aonuma, they ended up having a lot of trouble trying to be creative with that style. Now let's fast forward 1 year ahead to Space World of 2001, where everyone was anticipating an updated Zelda trailer. Oh my. What's this? Was this a joke? That is Link's green tunic, shield, and sword. But this funny-looking kid can't possibly be a descendant to the hero of time, right? And that was exactly the reaction many gamers had. Fans were extremely confused, and I don't blame them after seeing this just a year before. Many critics went as far as accusing Nintendo of aiming Zelda only at kids with its cartoony style. Without a doubt, the devs were shocked at the reception. Miyamoto defended himself in an interview by stating that games don't necessarily have to feature realistic graphics in order to appeal to a wide audience. He used the success of Hayao Miyazaki's famous anime as an example, and personally, I completely agree. Okay, so let's dig to the root of all this. Who was the one responsible for the creation of this oh so charming Link? If you recall from our previous episode, Haruhana excelled at creating distinct characters in Ocarina of Time. So amidst the creative block his colleagues were going through, he managed to doodle up a funny-looking Link. From there, it was a roller coaster. Oh, how about a moblin that looks like this? Maybe Link can steal their weapon too. One after another, the devs fed off each other's ideas like a massive snowball effect. According to Aonuma, the team was able to take advantage of the wacky body proportions by making the character expressions even more expressive than ever. As the devs experimented more with this fresh new look, the setting and theme of the game slowly unraveled itself. Aonuma realized that cel-shaded water looked rather interesting and figured, why not have lots of it? And that's how we got this. But since the entire overworld was practically covered in water, they figured this was more suitable. Now we know wind physics has been around as early as Super Mario Bros., but Miyamoto felt he was never able to properly illustrate it until the GameCube's technology came into light. With these three variables set, there was just one last obstacle. How can Link control the boat? Well, to do that, players will need to control the wind. And if you haven't noticed by now, there's actually a recurring theme shared among Zelda titles. And that be instruments. Though this time around, the devs decided to give Link a conductor's role. As the game was near completion and the release deadline coming closer, Aonuma stated that there were 2 stages which never made it into the final game. Concept art of these stages were left in the Hyrule Historia, GameCube Island, and Stovepipe Island. The game was released in December of 2002, called The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker. The hero's conquest in Ocarina of Time has been passed on in scrolls through the centuries, slowly becoming a legend. as was Ganondorf's return, which the gods dealt with by flooding the entire kingdom of Hyrule. More centuries have passed, and we find ourselves on Outset Island, where a series of unfortunate events take place, triggering the transformation of a regular boy into the hero of winds. A regular boy. I want to talk about that for a sec. Link in previous Zelda games has always been a gifted kid. Right off the bat, he was courageous and heroic. But Aonuma wanted the opposite this time around. Rather than giving him the wisdom you'd find in an honor student, he wanted a Link that put a lot more energy into solving problems like a normal 12-year-old would. Though I'm sure a real 12-year-old boy would crap himself at the sight of this. In fact, he further states that the very creation of Hyrule sprouted from Link's new personality, seeing his very own sister snatched up by a giant bird. Without hesitation, he gives chase. But coincidentally, off a cliff as well. Link had the courage, but not the brains. In contrast, Ganondorf wasn't a complete bloodthirsty villain this time around. Responsible for his design, Takizawa explained that as brutal as Ganondorf was, he wanted him to have an admirable sort of charm. A perfect example of this is when he reveals that his true intentions of kidnapping Princess Zelda was to revive the sunken kingdom of Hyrule. Later in the game, as I gained the ability to venture off on my talking boat, I began to take in just how vast the world of Wind Waker was. I know it's mostly a bunch of water, but simply the sight of cruising along the ocean, accompanied with adventurous music, and the anticipation of what mysteries lie on the island ahead, was such a surreal feeling. Even down to the fine details of Link turning his head to look at objects, all added to the experience. More than ever, the world of Zelda felt alive. The dungeons, on the other hand, unfortunately did take a dive in difficulty, which may be a good thing for newbies to the franchise. In turn, the devs decided to add other interesting twists. Ever since Ocarina of Time, we've played through dungeons with partners. As useless and annoying this partner was, it was a neat idea to say the least. Aonuma decided to expand on this concept by giving Link a flying partner, but flying with no restraints would make puzzles way too easy. So this was when the Rito tribe was born. And if you didn't already know, they're descendants of the Zoras. But how in the theories of Darwinism did this evolve into this? And don't even get me started with the Koroks. Anyways, Aonuma goes on revealing that the Rito tribe was initially going to be birds that were too fat to fly properly, thus solving the issue of Link flying wherever he wants. However, they settled with Medli in the end. On the other hand, Haruhana stated that the reason Makar and the rest of the Korok tribe looked like tree clumps was because they were intended to be floating platforms as Link's hookshot targets. But the devs felt too sorry for Makar and decided to have him plant seeds instead. You know, as beautiful and immersive as Wind Waker is, it definitely isn't perfect. Here, let me explain. So you're sailing. Then all of a sudden, oh, what's this? Treasure. Okay, getting closer. So now what do? Well, you gotta make that U-turn. This can be done by either reversing the wind direction or slowly cruising backwards. Both ways are unnecessarily time-consuming and completely breaks the pace of the game. As serene as the ocean view is, the extreme amount of sailing can become monotonous in itself. But to torture players with this annoying extra stuff is just a huge turnoff. Hey. Overall though, I'm glad the devs managed to shut most of the haters up who doubted the cartoony graphics at Space World. Wind Waker received brilliant reception and is a perfect example that realism isn't always necessary for a game to be great. A remake hit the shelves in September of 2013 called The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD. As the name suggests, it's Wind Waker in HD, with a bunch of sweet additions as well. Most importantly, thank God for the new Swift Sail. With all the experience Eiji Aonuma has gained from being a designer and director in major Zelda titles, it was time for him to take on the lead role this time as producer. Taking inspiration from Four Swords on the GBA, Aonuma wanted to create a multiplayer Zelda adventure. However, he realized that gamers in Japan don't have that kind of time to spend on lengthy adventures, let alone a multiplayer one. In the end, he decided to give the game a level-based structure so that players could take a break whenever they needed and still come back without feeling lost. The game was released in June of 2004, called The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventures. At first glance, I thought this game took place right after Four Swords, but it's actually one of the last games in the Zelda timeline, occurring eras after Twilight Princess. The plot opens just like on the GBA. Zelda checks up on the Four Swords, gets herself kidnapped, as Link loafs there once again. After the show's over, he finally picks up the Four Sword and begins his rescue mission. As we make our way into the first area, you're probably wondering why things look so familiar. For one, objects like houses, grass, and switches closely resembles that of A Link to the Past. Well, in fact, they are from A Link to the Past. And we have one hardcore Zelda fan to thank for that. Toshiaki Suzuki. Coincidentally, he's also the director. Being the hardcore fan that he was, Suzuki took it upon himself to go back to every single Zelda game to borrow elements to put into Four Swords Adventures. And kudos to him, cause this mixture of styles definitely gave the game a unique feel. Though not only are the cosmetics special, the gameplay is no slouch either. Combat in single-player mode specifically involves much more strategy than the combat you'd find in your average Zelda game. All thanks to formations. In every encounter, there'll always be an optimal way to organize the four links to deliver the most efficient kill. But at the same time, you gotta be 4 times more careful, since the other 3 links become vulnerable too. All in all, mastering these formations was the most rewarding part for me in Four Swords Adventures. Nintendo and Capcom share a close-knitted relationship when it comes to Zelda, ever since they partnered up to create several hit titles. Well, Capcom's back again with a brand new concept. The future versus the past, forward versus reverse, summer versus winter. These were a few of the unique themes scattered across the Zelda universe. Trying to come up with his own, director Hidemaru Fujibayashi put on his thinking cap and came up with a big versus small. Through toying around with the concept, he realized that some really interesting things were possible. With the theme in place, he needed to figure out a way for Link to shrink. The answer? A talking hat named Eslo. According to Fujibayashi, his design actually took an insane amount of time to make, which is surprising considering he's just Link's hat with a beak and eyes. The game was released in January of 2005 called The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap. Just to note, if you ever decide to play the Four Swords games, play this one first. Cause it's the first in the trilogy explaining how Vaati and the Four Sword came to be. With that said, sometime following the creation of the Kingdom of Hyrule, Epikori brought a powerful blade in order to banish an evil outbreak. Celebrating this miracle, the royal family would host a festival once a year. Vaati infiltrates, turns Zelda into stone, attempts to steal the light force, and snaps the Epikori blade in half. As for Link, we all know what happens next. The Minish Cap is truly an underrated game. Capcom did a wonderful job with the big small concept, which breathed new life into the Zelda universe. On top of that, some of the items you'll find are incredibly unique, like the Gust Jar, the Passy Cane, the Packy Cane, the Patchy Cane? I think my best guess is the Patchy Cane, the Moments, and much more. The world also adopts a new design compared to previous handheld titles, which caters to those who love the toon-style graphics in Wind Waker. Personally speaking, I think it really goes to show how far the Zelda franchise can be taken. Capcom showed us a whole new perspective on Zelda with Four Sword and the Minish Cap. So just think of the diversity we'd see if other skilled companies had a chance. But then again, we all know just how much Nintendo cherishes third-party support. So around this time, the GameCube was on its last legs, and Aonuma wanted the console to go out with a big bang by releasing a Zelda title that would blow gamers away. As the staff members were recruited onto the team, they started realizing just how big this Zelda was going to be. Heck, even temporary workers were asked to come help out. After getting everyone together, the big question was, what direction should they take Zelda this time? They've tried realism, they've tried cartoony, and even a combination of the two. Well, despite changing hearts and minds with the cartoon graphics in Wind Waker, there was still a huge outcry for a realistic Zelda in the years that followed. Taking that into consideration, the team decided to go for it. However, according to Takizawa, they didn't want to engage the competition and struggle to see who could make the most photorealistic game. Not that there would be much of a fight. Rather, they were aiming to expand on the atmosphere that was in Ocarina of Time. If you've paid attention, in many of the main Zelda titles, Link starts off as a pretty regular kid and gradually matures throughout his adventure. But the problem with Twilight Princess is he's an adult right off the bat. As a result, players weren't able to experience Link's journey through puberty as they normally could. In an attempt to fill that void, Aonuma came up with the idea to turn him into a wolf. With this new transformation, players could see how Link will adapt and grow throughout the game. Aonuma further explains that he chose the wolf because he felt it symbolized a heroic animal, and there was a level of mysticism behind it. Now, of course, we can't talk about Wolf Link without talking about Midna. And you won't believe how she came to be. It wasn't like, oh yeah, let's give Link this cool new partner. Quite frankly, she started off as nothing. One day, Miyamoto was watching Link run around as a wolf, and he felt it looked too boring. From a side view, sure, it looks cool because you can see every movement of the legs. But from a rear view, there's really not much going on. Hence, Miyamoto ordered the team to have someone riding the wolf, and slowly this character evolved from some random thing on Link's back to a central piece of the story. Just like that, Midna was born. So, here we are at E3 of 2004, as Reggie wraps up the presentation, leaving the viewers with a surprise trailer for an unknown title. Everyone was like, what could it be? What could it be? But as the deep choir voices started rumbling in, accompanied with epic orchestral music, they knew. Oh, they knew. It was one heck of a crowd reaction, to say the least. Iwata even recalls some fans near him breaking down into tears as they were watching. This incredible reaction motivated Aonuma and the rest of the team to make this the best Zelda of all time. But a little problem was slowly creeping in as development went on, and that be the Wii. Yep, the Wii was coming soon, and management wanted the devs to make this Zelda a launch title for it. Shocked by the news, the entire team started brainstorming ways they could implement the new controller. All sorts of crazy ideas were popping up. Like, believe it or not, the entire game was just going to be played with only the Wii remote. You would have to point at different spots to navigate Link, sort of like the DS Zeldas. The game was released in November of 2006, called The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. Events carry off many years after Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Link, having already warned Zelda of Ganon's treachery, eventually had him set for execution. But Ganon's Triforce of Power prevented him from dying, thus forcing the sages to seal him away into the Mirror of Twilight. Centuries pass by, and new Link lives in the peaceful village of Ordon until he learns of his fate with the Twilight Realm. So, after all the ambition, high expectations, and the twists and turns of the development cycle, how did the game turn out? The motion controls? Brilliant. Well, at least the aiming was. Sword swings definitely don't feel accurate, but it's manageable and gets the job done. However, a bit too sensitive though, wouldn't you say? Also, I cannot for the life of me understand why there has to be this fairy floating around the screen wherever I go. It's so annoying. I know I can turn it off in the menu, but that turns off motion aiming as well. So that's out of the question. I might as well play the GameCube version. Now, if you can get past that pesky blue thing, then there's a vast world for you to explore. Horse riding was drastically improved. Link can finally swing his sword, which feels quite satisfying. Now, I can't say the same for the wolf segments of the Twilight Princess. At first, I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. But when the game constantly forces you to collect bugs to restore light to an area, man, does it get repetitive. Even the methods to reach the bugs repeats itself. On the other hand, I gotta thank Miyamoto for coming up with Midna. The relationship between Link and her is priceless. Her mischievous attitude often pushes Link near the brink of insanity. But as the plot progresses, it's heartwarming to see the two adapt to one another and bond. Though at times, Midna can be a bit creepy. Now, in terms of narrative, Twilight Princess can certainly take your emotions for a roller coaster ride. A number of cutscenes throughout the game are quite cinematic for a Zelda game, and some can even give you the feels. On the other side of the spectrum, we have cutscenes like these. Overall, Twilight Princess marks Link's debut into the next generation. Having ventured through various styles, we'll take a look at what new heights the Zelda team will take the series in the final part of our retrospective. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.